perfect shot, man.
This truly is a trophy, not because of what it is, but for what we had to accomplish to get it.
The pain training, I love it.
Feel how your heart rate is right now? This is what elk hunting's like. Now you gotta make a shot.
Welcome to the Geared for the Outdoors podcast, brought to you by Numa Outdoors. I'm your host and Numa team member, Will Cooper. The Geared for the Outdoors podcast is dedicated to bow hunters and all those who love the outdoors. Our mission here is to bring you information from industry experts and veteran hunters that can help better prepare you for your next hunt. We understand that time in the outdoors is precious. That's why our goal is to bring you gear that is built to over-deliver, designed to outperform, and proven to outlast. To learn more, head to our website at numaoutdoors.com, check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We appreciate y'all listening in, and we hope y'all enjoy. What's up, everybody? We want to welcome y'all back to another episode of the Geared for the Outdoors podcast. And this morning, we got Mr. Joel Turner, ShotIQ, coming on board with us. He's blocked out some time this morning to sit down and talk how to become a better archer. And Joel, we just want to thank you for coming on this morning.
You bet, man. Thanks for having me, Will.
Absolutely. Joel, before we really start diving in to everything you know with archery, if we can, let's get that 30,000 foot view of who Joel Turner is and how ShotIQ came about.
Oh, wow. So it's ShotIQ was born of necessity, and it was born from failure on my part. You know, I started shooting a centerfire rifle when I was 5 years old, and you can imagine how bad that trigger spank was, right?
Oh, yeah.
And just dealing with recoil as a young man, and then shooting a bow, started shooting a bow at 7. And it was, according to a 7-year-old, I was a hero, right? But yeah. I look back on it now, and it was, I would shoot till my fingers bled. And because I didn't know anything when I was a young man, as far as that goes, I mean, most people start out archery and they start teaching themselves. And the human mind and body will follow a specific path. And it's not the path to accuracy, it's the path to efficiency. Mm-hmm. And so there I was, 10, 11, 12 years old, draw my bow back and locked off target by a long ways, like feet off of the target. But I didn't know any better. And I would either jump my bow to the target or drop my bow to the target. And then if you put a centerfire rifle in my hand, as soon as the crosshairs would get on anything that I wanted to shoot, I would just punch that trigger, right? And brace for recoil. So that lasted throughout all my adolescent years, and not being able to figure things out and starting to read things and watch things about this thing called target panic. And not realizing that it's not a disease. It's something that we're all born with. It's just the human mind's way of protecting you from explosions, really. And so life progressed, and went to college, learned some stuff about geography, natural resources, economics, all that stuff, got a degree in that, and then became a cop. And in the cop world, what that really did for me is that got my determination high enough to finally start figuring things out. And, figuring out how to control a shot. And, it was the necessity of shot control that really got me set on a path of research. And then I became a firearms instructor and started to figure out the science of the mind. And then I took that to my archery, and now with as many experiments as I was able to do, I was at one point, 2009 to 2012, I was the lead firearms instructor for the Washington State Criminal Justice Training Commission. So every cop that came through the academy came through me for firearms training. It gave me this huge pool of experiments I could do on recruits, and and figuring out how I was going to get them to concentrate on a trigger press when it was the only thing that was going to end the fight. Right. Mm-hmm. Now, you talk about gunfighting and all that. That's all fast trigger press stuff. But there are certain occasions when a precision trigger press is required. And there are certain tests and such where marksmanship is required. So getting a person to actually learn how to concentrate and getting them to do that for themselves in a high stress shooting event, and then taking that science to archery and bow hunting, where, every shooting event, as far as if it's a high stress tournament or bow hunting, shooting an animal, it's the gunfight, right?
Yeah.
It's the adrenaline dump. It's the physiological changes that happen in the body that also affect the mind. And so it was learning how to take the same mind with you, no matter what, right? And following a blueprint for a shot, no matter what, and figuring out why that's necessary in today's world, and why that's ethical, and so that's what ShotIQ is about. It's basically, I say that I don't teach people how to shoot. I do, but more importantly, I teach people the conscious defiance of human nature. I teach you what decisions you need to make in a shot, when specifically you need to make these decisions, and then scientifically how to carry those out. And it's very powerful stuff, man.
Big time. And, I can just say from experience, the whole blueprint is huge, because after getting to meet with you and go through some of those elk-shaped camps and getting to listen to you this past spring, I had this process of how I shoot.
Mm-hmm.
And I became really consistent and was just dialed in.
Mm-hmm.
And everything you teach about that, it's just so true, because when I got up in the mountains for Total Archery Challenge, this past one at Park City, I went and shot the knock-on course, and there were some crazy elevation changes that they put you through in like the first 3 targets.
Mm-hmm.
You're just going up the mountain, coming down the mountain. You're breathing hard. You're just getting through that. And then you get to the target, and the first 3 targets I shot like crap because I threw my blueprint out the window.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden I thought, wait, hold up. Joel Turner would be yelling at me right now. I need to slow it down and go through my blueprint, go through my process. Otherwise, he'd be sitting here whacking me with an arrow.
Well, it's and that's one of the things, this podcast about becoming a better archer. And it was that moment in time when you had that realization that, hey, wait a minute, I gotta change how I'm doing my business here.
Mm-hmm.
That realization is where people, I believe people need to get to, because there's a lot of folks that go to Total Archery Challenge or whatever tournament they go to. And yes, it's cool, it's fun and all that stuff. But if you go up on that mountain and you punch the trigger, and I say it like this to kind of light a fire under people.
Mm-hmm.
If you go up there and punch the trigger, you are literally practicing your own failure.
Yes.
Why would you do that? And people are like, oh man, that's so harsh, and people have taken offense to that or whatever. And it's just, I got no other way to say it, right? Because I can be all PC and unicorns and rainbows about it, but
that doesn't help.
That's the problem in archery. If I tell you, oh, maybe you should change this or whatever, people are like, oh yeah, maybe I'll do that. Well, if you don't do that, are you really being the most ethical hunter that you can by controlling everything that's humanly possible in that shot? There's a lot of stuff that's not, you can't control. Wind, animal movement, jump in the string, all that stuff. But
heart rate.
We should not be missing because of a lack of shot control, because you've practiced your entire life in punching the trigger. And then when you get on a critter, you're just going to get even more efficient at punching the trigger.
Yeah.
And the whole system is just going to go into hyperdrive. So that's where people find themselves, you find yourself at full draw instead of drawing your bow back with purpose and knowledge.
Yep.
Right. So,
well, let's dive into the whole becoming a better archer. So would you say that begins with building the right blueprint, or what's Joel Turner's process in creating a better archer?
if somebody comes to me and they at least know how to make the arrow come out the front of the bow, right?
Right.
They know how to draw it back. They know how to hold it. If they don't, then I'll teach them those things that are the most accurate systems that we know of, according to, just science and professional archers. What do these people do that are shooting for a living? But so that I get them to do that, right? And then I, as you've seen in the clinics that I do, the first thing you do is you shoot in front of a bunch of people.
Yep.
And that's just like people speaking, right? It's like a public speaking event where people get nervous and their heart rate changes and all kinds of things happen. And they shoot an arrow and they'll usually punch the trigger on whatever release they're shooting. Or if they shoot with a stick bow, they're not actually getting into their back muscles. They may let it go before they even get to anchor. They may be locked off target, jump into target, whatever it may be. And I just take a quick inventory of what we got going on. And I am inventorying the physical aspects of the shot, but I'm mostly inventorying the mental aspects.
Yeah.
How did this person approach the shot? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the first fail point is. People will step up to the line and they just draw their bow back. And they have this physical process that they know works. To draw the bow back, they know how to anchor. They're supposed to look through their peep. Excuse me. They put a pin on the target, and then they work the trigger. And they have all been told to work the trigger slowly. I mean, that's the first thing you do when you leave the bow shop. Okay, so you draw back, aim, okay, and then you work the trigger as slow as you can. Oh, you kind of punch that one. Okay, see you later, right?
Oh, squeeze it.
Yeah, so there's advice given on what to do, but there's very rarely advice given on how to do it.
Right.
So that's when we start to inventory what's going on in this person's head. Did they approach the shot by making a decision to shoot it with control, or did they just draw their bow back and hope that their physical process was going to take over for them, which it will. That's what it's built for. So then we start to figure out, I show them visual proprioception. I ask them, how do you aim? And they'll give me this big diatribe about how they aim and all this stuff. I'm like, really, all you have to do is put your pin on the target and watch it like a picture. And then I get them to realize they don't really have any control over their aim. They just need to put the pin on the target. But the pin cannot equal an explosion. It's just something that gets done, right? And that's where the things start to go haywire for most folks, because they've always intuitively used the pin or the aim as the stimulus for their shot. And that makes intuitive sense. When your pin's on, hit the trigger, right? And you're going to hit the target.
Yeah.
Well, the problem when you do that is when you punch the trigger, there are pre-ignition movements that are linked to your trigger motor program. It's the flinch, right? It's not just your trigger finger moving. It's your bow hand closing. It's your muscles collapsing in your back. It's all kinds of stuff to keep you safe. Right? You're trying to hold this bow apart, and there's going to be an explosion, and your mind wants to know exactly when that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And it uses the sight picture as the stimulus for that. So when the pin's on, the bow explodes. And so then there gets this association of the pin being on and the bow going off. And that's when things really start to go haywire. So I get them to realize that the aim means nothing. Just get it done and watch it to keep it. Watch it like a picture. You're not watching the pin or the super hyper focused on the target so that it's crystal clear and your pin's blurry. They both have to be fairly in focus. They're not going to be totally in focus, but it's just a picture. You got to kind of bring your eyes back from it and watch it like you're watching TV. It's literally all it is. Right. And if people want to think about it, you can think about how you drive. You're driving down the road and you see a yellow line and a white line. You get visual feedback to your vehicle veering to the left. So you automatically correct that movement on the steering wheel. And when you get the right visual feedback that the vehicle is back in the middle of the lane, that movement stops or changes. So it's all based on visual feedback, but the feedback cannot equal an explosion. It's just something that you get done.
Yeah.
If people really want to experience it, go back to a time when you said, okay, I'm not shooting this shot. You draw your bow back, you put your pin on it. Oh man, it just rock solid, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's only because the pin no longer equals an explosion, or the aim no longer equals an explosion. That's how you should feel every single time you draw your bow back. Whether you're going to shoot the shot or not, that's none of your business, right? Well, your business, the first job in your shot is to put the damn pin on the target, or get your instinctive aim, whatever that may be for you, or get your point on the target, or wherever it is in a gap for a stick bow shooter. Just get your aim done and then watch it to keep it.
Got it.
And that's the first humongous step for most people, because again, they're using the aim as a stimulus for their shot. So once I get them to detach from that and realize that they have no control over it, because it's always returning to center. That's what I mean by no control.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you put the pin on the target, it's moving, yes, but its next movement is always back to the center.
Yeah.
So just let it work, man. Enjoy the show. Okay? And then, go ahead.
No, you go for it, man.
So, and then it's a matter of getting this person to find determination. And that's a weird step in the archery learning process, is to get somebody determined enough to do a movement on the trigger that's going to cause an explosion.
Mm-hmm.
But they have to be determined enough to make decisions so that they will move slow enough they could stop it anywhere within it. And, on the online course and in my, one-on-one courses or my live clinics, it's, I help people find determination usually through ridicule.
Oh, yeah.
In a lot of the camps and clinics and stuff, on the SWAT team, I would just have you do push-ups or run or whatever. But, at the clinics, I have to get you to find your determination or manufacture determination.
I saw you do that to Dirk at the Denver Elk Shape camp.
Mm-hmm.
How he was at full draw, and you're right there, and he actually let down that one time.
Right. Yeah. And, I'd never shot with Dirk before.
Mm-hmm.
I'd watched him shoot a few shots on game animals just from video stuff. And we had talked in the past about some target panic issues that he was having.
Mm-hmm.
And, but Dirk, being the determined person that he is, he found it, right? He went back into those dark places of failure and found the determination. And at some point must have said, I'm not doing it this way anymore. I'm going to do it this way, no matter what. And that's the first step, is finding or manufacturing determination. And I cannot teach you that.
Yeah.
Nobody can teach you determination, but we can help you find it, right?
Well, for sure.
Through ridicule or physical exertion or whatever it may be. And, it may be the fact that I just told you that if you keep punching the trigger, you are practicing your own failure. Yeah. That might spark a fire in you that goes, oh, okay, I get it. And for me, it was in 2008 shooting a hog in South Texas. I mean,
really?
The hog was coming in, and I had missed so many shots on that hunt. And the hog was coming in, and I was, nervous, and I was pissed off because I wasn't getting through my clicker on my longbow. And this hog came in. He turns broadside at 20 yards, and I found myself at full draw again. Right? I didn't make any decisions. I found myself at full draw. I was locked off the target. I knew I wasn't going to get through my clicker. It was just another crap show happening in front of me. Right? Mm-hmm. And it was like I was watching myself from above. It was really weird. I'm like, this is not going to happen. So, but that one time I was finally pissed off enough that I let the bow down on that hog. So I'm not doing this again. Right. And then that was the first time ever in my life that I made what I call the original decision.
Really?
Back then it was, I'm going to shoot this shot perfectly or I ain't shooting it at all.
Yeah.
And it finally meant more to me to stay in the shot process than to kill that hog. And as I drew my bow back that second time, as I drew, I said, I'm going to do this right. And little did I know that those decisions, those conscious decisions that I was making in my shot were making my presence more and more intense. It was putting me in the moment to make those conscious decisions.
Yeah.
So as I drew my bow back, I'm going to do this right. And then I got to full draw. I got to anchor. I got my aim that I knew was right. And then for the first time ever, I said, here I go. And that was the big kicker for me. Here I go made me so intensely present that I remembered, oh yeah, dummy, I still got to get through this clicker, right? And I started talking myself through that movement. And I was screaming to myself, keep pulling, keep pulling, keep pulling, right? And I'm just, my entire everything in my being was in the movement to get me to my clicker. And as I'm screaming myself, I'm feeling the movement, and click, it goes off. I shoot the arrow. I smoke that hog. But I never blueprinted it. Right?
That's where it all started.
That's where it all started, but I never blueprinted it. So I couldn't repeat it because I didn't know how I did it. I did not blueprint those decisions. I didn't blueprint how I concentrated. Right? So years went by from 2008 to 2014. I had another successful shot in 2010. Now, mind you, between 2008 and 2014, I killed a lot of critters with my bow, with my longbow. But I didn't control most of those shots. Most of them were, I at least got the aim done. So I was getting through job number one in my shot, but I was not getting through the rest of the story, the actual movement of control, right, for the trigger movement. So I killed a lot of critters. 2010, I had a bull come down into a water hole, turn broadside, 41 yards away with my longbow. And I remember I was on my knees shooting through this little hole in the pine trees. And I've told this story a million times, but I guess it's worth telling again. And so there I was, the bull's 41 yards. He looks the other way. And I said to myself before I drew my bow back, I'm shooting this shot perfectly, or I'm not shooting it at all.
Yeah.
So again, I made that same original decision. I drew my bow back. As I drew with knowledge and purpose. And I said to myself, I'm going to do this right. I got to my anchor. I got my aim, which at that point, 41 yards, I had to put the point of my arrow 18 inches over that bull's back. And I knew that specifically, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I put my point where it was, and then here I go. And then I screamed myself in my head through that movement again. The clicker goes off. I shot that shot, smoked that bull at 41 yards. But I didn't blueprint it. And so 11, 12, 13, I killed a bunch of critters, but man, none of them were with controlled shots.
Yeah.
And then 14, I killed a bull in September with my recurve. Again, not a controlled shot. And then in December 14th, 2014 was my turning point. That is when I put it all together.
That's when you put pen to paper.
That is when I was sitting in my tree stand and the buck that I'd been after all season comes in, walks underneath my tree stand. I'm looking at him through my feet. He walks back out. He's standing broadside at 8 yards. Now, mind you, this is a blacktail that they are ghosts, man. You just don't get a lot of opportunities at big blacktail bucks. And there he is standing at 8 yards broadside. I draw back and I dump that string. And I shot him right in the heart. And I'm like, damn it. I did not control that shot. I mean, yes, I was happy that I shot the buck well. I mean, it was a good hit.
Mm-hmm.
But it was not controlled. And the reason that all this stuff scared the crap out of me is because I became a police sniper in 2003.
Yeah.
When I got on the SWAT team, and it scared the crap out of me because I didn't know how it was going to go in a high stress life or death shooting event with a centerfire rifle.
Mm-hmm.
Because even at that point, 2014, you put a coyote in front of me and I would rush my shot. right? Coyotes were like my nemesis because I'd get the crosshot. I'm like, oh my God, he's going to get away. And I'd punch a trigger.
You just get it off as fast as you can.
Now, a lot of people out there can relate to this, right? I mean, they know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
If you get a critter that's fairly fleet of foot and, you think you only have a split second to shoot that thing, right? It's usually only rushed by the human element. It's not rushed by the critters element. So that's what scared the crap out of me because I'm like, is all this stuff going to come back when I shoot at a hostage taker? And that's where my determination was embedded. And so I sat there that night in that tree stand in the rain and in the dark. And I went, I got to figure this stuff out, man.
Mm-hmm.
So I went back through the inventory of shots when I'm still sitting in the tree stand. I hadn't even tracked this buck yet, right? And I go through the inventory of shots. And I'm like, there was two that I specifically remember. The one in 08 on that hog and the one in 2010 on that bull. And I'm like, what was it? What was the difference between those two shots and every shot in between there and the one that I just took 10 minutes ago? And it was the decisions. It was the drawing my bow back with knowledge and purpose instead of finding myself at full draw and hoping some physical process would take over. Because the physical process is going to take over. It's the default. For you to flinch is the default.
Yeah.
You're going to do that unless you do a conscious override of your own central nervous system. So figuring out what decisions I made in those shots, when I made them specifically within the shot, and then how did I carry them out? And so that really set me on the path of research into motor learning and performance. And I was able to mesh that science that I learned into my experiences. And that is what is now controlled process shooting.
Man, and it's so crazy that you're talking about all this because I think that's something when we talk about letting down, making that decision to let down and not take that shot, I don't think enough people do that. And when you start talking about kind of these aha moments where you figure out what your decision-making process was, I was telling you a little while ago, for me, that happened at Total Archery Challenge this past couple weeks ago. I've been rushing my shots. Heart rate was up. We're going up and down the mountain. Just wasn't making great shots. And then I finally got to the target where it's like, hold up. I pulled back. I think I had lost an arrow at this point, starting to get frustrated. And I let down. I'm like, what am I not doing? Not going through my process. As soon as I slowed myself down and started making those controlled decisions and going through my process again, and I think the two guys I was shooting with can even attest to this, then it started clicking. You could see it start clicking for me. I started making all my shots. They were great. And I was doing what I was supposed to be doing. And then when you look back and you see all these YouTubers, past people on TV that make those bad shots on animals, it kind of makes you think like maybe they should have let down at that moment because they weren't ready to make that shot.
Well, that's most people, but you said you shot 3 targets before you had this realization.
Yeah.
And the problem is that your mind is not going to want to remember causing and ignoring an explosion. It does not want to store that in the memory banks because it's a negative event to your mind. An archery shot or a rifle shot is a very negative event. So you will naturally forget. It doesn't want you to do that, Will. I mean, it wants you to brace for recoil. So it took a conscious override of you to step back and go, okay, wait a minute. What am I doing here? But it took you 3 shots. The same thing happens in gunfight. When cops draw their pistol and they fire 5 or 6 rounds, and then they go, wait a minute, this isn't working.
Yeah.
I'm not hitting the target. It's not being effective, whatever it may be. And it takes them 5 or 6 rounds to make the decision to shoot it with control, if that's what is required for that environment. Well, most archery environments, closed loop shooting or moving the trigger slow enough you could stop it is the requirement for you to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
You can't punch a trigger too often. I mean, you can punch a trigger all you want on moving critters. In fact, that's what's required for moving critters. But if that thing's stationary, you should probably be in a precision environment, going closed loop. So instead of it taking 3 shots, you need to practice making decisions so that it's the first shot every time, right? You shoot every shot with the same blueprint, no matter what. And that's where the determination comes in, because yes, it is work, but the battle that you fought, when you have the right tools or the right weaponry, it makes it so much easier. And we'll talk about the shot control house in a little bit, but you know, it can't take you 3 targets, because that may be your whole season.
That's true,
right?
Yeah, especially when you're traveling. You know, guys are going halfway across the country for that 5-day elk hunt that they've been prepping for all year.
Yeah, and you get 1 shot.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, if you don't make a decision until the 3rd shot, your season's over. In fact, your next 3 seasons are over. Right. So you better get your stuff together now and figure out what decisions you need to make, when you need to make them, and then scientifically how you're going to carry these things out. And that's what we do at ShotIQ. We set you on this path. And people always ask me, how long does your program take? And I literally tell them, it takes 1 shot. Now, that 1 shot might be the next shot, or it might be 20 shots down the line, but you have to get to that 1 shot where you control it so that you can blueprint, right? So that just depends on how high your determination level is. You know, and we have some drills that we do in these courses where it shows you, like, you're not gonna succeed in this specific task that I give you until you get determined enough to make a decision. And then we take that science of what you just did and we plug that into your archery shot. And that's, it's very powerful to know exactly how you're going to shoot every shot for the rest of your life, no matter what. Be that a $20,000 elk hunt, or if you're hunting whitetails in your backyard.
Yeah.
You know? So, I mean, answer me this, Will. So you found yourself on the mountain, right? And you started shooting these shots. Now, after you had that epiphany, did you shoot any more uncontrolled shots? The entire tack.
I think truthfully, there was 2 or 3 more towards the end that I did not shoot well.
Okay.
Now, that I have only me to blame for that. But yeah, there was definitely probably 2 or 3 more that I didn't shoot well, but it was kind of after I had that aha moment of, hold up, I'm not doing what I do.
Mm-hmm.
I started clicking, everything was great, but then I could probably say that the other 2 or 3 that I still hit foam, but didn't shoot well like I wanted to.
Right. You didn't shoot a controlled shot, right?
Right. So I was letting my mind wander.
Right. Again, that's the default. And the skill is not in the shot. The skill is in bringing your mind back to where it needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so if when you analyze those 2 or 3 that you shot after your epiphany, you'll realize that you never made a decision to shoot them with control. You didn't even start with that.
Yeah.
Right? You stepped up to the line, somebody was talking, blah, blah, whatever. You need to be able to converse with people and realize the environment you're in and see how far the target is and all that stuff. You have to be able to process all those things. But then when it comes down to the act of shooting, original decision. I'm shooting this shot with control no matter what.
Yep.
And that silences everything around you, right? That makes you intensely present for your shot that's about to happen. You draw your bow back. If you need more presence, then say something to yourself as you draw your bow back. I'm going to do this right. I'm Will Cooper, the badass. I don't care what you say, right?
Yeah.
You got to say something as you draw your bow back, because now you're making decisions within the process, right? And then it makes you intensely present for that first job. And you see how none of these outside entities even exist anymore, because you are now in your shot process. You're making decisions that make you present so that you can concentrate.
Mm-hmm.
So you get that pin on the target. And yes, it's moving, but you have no control over it anyway. So just let it be. Enjoy the show. Hook that finger on the trigger, or put your thumb on the trigger, or get to your click and your hinge, or whatever system you're shooting.
Yeah.
And then you still have more jobs to do. So after you address the trigger, it's the decision, that critical second in time. Get yourself through that critical second, that 1 second after your mind believes the aim is complete. And after you have addressed the trigger, that critical second is coming like a freight train, because everything's lined up. Why would you not be shooting? Right? But you have to get through that critical second by making the decision. Here I go. That makes you intensely present for the shot activation movement. And then you start talking.
Yep.
Now, in the elk-shaped camps that you and I were at, did I talk about the shot control house?
Yes.
Okay. Well, for your listeners, I want to give them this analogy, because it really seems to be hitting home with a lot of folks.
I want to hear it again.
So you are, when you have that shot and you believe it's imminent, like, okay, this is happening. Maybe that bull just turned broadside. The buck just fed out. Maybe it's a stationary 3D target, but it's about to happen. You are now standing on the porch of the shot control house, and you're looking at the front door. Your shot process lives inside that house, but you got to get in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that opens doors in the shot control house are decisions, conscious decisions. So when there you are, you've got your grip on the bow, you've got your grip on the release is on the string, or you've got your fingers around the string, or if you're super cool, you've got your thumb around the string and you're a thumb shooter with a stick. Okay.
Yeah.
But there you are ready to shoot this shot. Tension is about to be put on the string, but you got to get through the door.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's where I'm going to shoot this shot with control no matter what. The door swings open. You step inside the shot control house. Now you're in your shot process. The first room that you walk through, and you got to walk through it, is the aiming room. But all your friends are in there. Oh, God, it's unicorns and rainbows, and it's such a safe place, right? Yeah. Your mind wants you to stay in the aiming room so that it can brace you for recoil. It never wants you to proceed through the house. But you have to kind of put the blinders on and just get the aim done. So just walk through the house, right?
Yep.
And then once you get through there, and it's going to be calling you back, right? But you got to be strong. You walk through that aiming room, and you got to close the door on the aiming room. You closing the door on the aiming room is equated to you addressing the trigger. So you putting your finger deep around that index finger trigger, or putting your thumb deep on that thumb button, that is the mechanical signal to your mind that you are closing the door on the aiming room. We're moving on, right? Mm-hmm. So that's a mechanical signal that closes the door on the aiming room.
That's a hard door to close sometimes
for a lot of people, because that is where your mind never wants you to leave, right? So giving the aim away is a skill in itself. And for some personalities, it's a difficult task, right? But if you look at it like this house, it seems to be easier. Yeah. So you addressing the trigger, you haven't even put your finger on the trigger yet when you're walking through the aiming room. Get that aim done. You may prep your hand so that your finger is close to the trigger or your thumb is close to the barrel, but it's not on it yet. Save that for closing the door. So you've aimed. Now you put your finger on the trigger. That closes the door, but it does not lock it.
Right.
Right? So there you are. You've aimed, fingers on the trigger. that cannot trigger the shot. Now we're in the hallway, right? And we got to lock the door.
Okay.
Locking the door of the aiming room is done by "here I go." Right? It's a phrase that is the conscious override. And the reason that I use "here I go" is because that is very common verbiage for people to use when they're jumping out of airplanes or jumping off a cliff into water or whatever. It is the conscious decision. It is the conscious override of your central nervous system. You're standing there on the edge of the cliff, and you got your little toesies hanging over the edge. If you're thinking in the future or of the result of what you're about to do, you'll never jump. Like, I think I might die if I do this. You'll never jump at that point. It's not until you go, take that big deep breath and "here I go." Then and only then have you overridden your central nervous system enough that you can hurl your body off of a cliff. Right? So that's why we use that, because it is a determined statement. Right? So there you are. You've aimed. You've got your finger on the trigger. Then it's "here I go." "Here I go" does several things. It locks the door on the aiming room. It makes you intensely present. And it opens the door on the concentration room. The problem is the concentration room is on fire. Right? So how would you literally and actually get yourself to walk into a room that is on fire, knowing that you're going to get burnt and you can't run through it? Right? You have to move slow enough you could stop yourself anywhere within the room. Right?
Okay.
So the room's on fire. So this is where people have to realize how much determination it takes, how strong the decisions need to be, and then finally how to concentrate and walk yourself through this room, because you got to get through it. Right? So "here I go" opens that door to that fiery mess, but you got to talk yourself through it. Would you not have to talk yourself through that room on fire? Hell yes, you would.
Oh, hell yeah.
Right? So figure out what you're going to say to yourself to direct and trap your concentration into your shot activation movement. And once you enter that room, you might have to talk pretty loud because you're getting burnt the whole time. Because in that room, in that concentration room, is where all those thoughts come in. When's this thing going to go off? Mm-hmm. Oh my God, it's a 7x7. I'm going to be a hero. This is taking way too long. And that's where the explosion lives. Right? So your mind doesn't even want you to go into that room.
Yeah.
Right? So all those bad things live in that room. It's a fiery mess, but you got to get through it. So there you start. You start that first step. You're walking that room and you're moving slow, and you got to scream in your head sometimes, but that scream's got to be smooth, right? Because how you speak is how you will move. Because that's how the concentration link is happening. So you're talking yourself through that room and you're working through that trigger, and all of a sudden, pow, it breaks as a surprise. And that arrow now actually goes behind the pin. But the problem is that you just popped out the back door of the shot control house.
Mm-hmm.
You're not in the house anymore.
You're
right?
out back porch.
So you got to walk around to the front, and there you are on the porch again for the next shot. And the door is closed just like it was on the previous shot.
Yep.
So it takes the same decision to get through the door, the same strength to get through the aiming room, the same decisions to close the door, open the door to the concentration room, all this stuff. You're working through the same house over and over. You know the floor plan. So your mind wants to run through it. Right? It's like, we don't need to stop here. We don't need to open this door. Let's just go. Maybe I'll take you down the hallway, right? To the target panic room. Right? Yeah. So, but it's that front door that most people never get through. And you see it, especially in these events where, it's not high tension. It's a fun shoot, right? So TAC is a big fun shoot, and there's challenge and all this stuff, but everybody's laughing and joking, and it's their turn on the stake, and they're thinking, God, I hope I hit this thing. right? Or wouldn't that be cool if I hit this thing?
Yeah.
They're not making decisions on how they're going to do it because they're having fun with their buddies, which is, it's the pinnacle of archery. It's awesome to be out there with like-minded people that you love, and it's just awesome. But when it comes down to the shot, if you want to be a badass on the mountain, you got to buckle down and you got to open that door. But what you see people do is they're still talking when they draw their bow back, still talking to their buddy, right? And you know instantly that that shot is going to be punched. There's no way around it because they've already started into the physical process of the shot, and they're not even in their shot process. They're not even in the house yet. They never opened the door.
I'm guilty of that. Guilty as charged.
Right? So you see it. And what I look for in people's shot, I will BS and crap talk with the best of them.
Mm-hmm.
But when you see me shoot, there's a pause.
Oh, heck yeah.
Shot. And that's what's missing in most people because they never open the door. They stand on the porch, they're looking at the door, and then they see a squirrel in the yard, right? And then they just stay out in the yard and they run around the yard and, oh, look at me, I did okay. Let's go to the next target, right? And so it's
home is home.
Yeah, it's this spiral. It's this downward spiral. And I made a post on Instagram the other day for some folks that there was a video that they put out and they were at TAC and they were shooting, and it was one archer after another, and every one of them was a trigger punch.
Rattlesnake.
Oh, damn, look at that one. That was a trigger punch. That was a big one. And I messaged these folks and I'm like, damn, people, you're practicing your own failure at this. And some took offense to it, and I apologize for that. However, it got every one of those people to think about it.
That's good.
Shot control is a thing now, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is something by which we are judged. And, people are like, oh, you shouldn't judge people. Well, I want you to be successful. And what you're doing is not going to be successful. You might be successful every now and again, but I want you to feel what I feel as far as shot control goes, because I don't have a front door on my house anymore. Right? I blew that son of a buck off the hinges.
She gone.
Determination, right? So when I step up on the porch, I just walk right in. Right?
Now,
I don't have to stand in front of people and go, I'm going to shoot this shot with control no matter what, because that is a principle by which I live.
Mm-hmm.
I'm shooting a controlled shot. It may go in the X, it may not, but I'm not going to miss it because of a lack of control. See what I mean?
Now, I've got a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
This has happened to me, and I'm sure it's happened to others out there. And you have this blueprint that you set.
Mm-hmm.
You have a controlled process. You're shooting great, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then, let's say, for whatever reason, you still think you're going through that same blueprint, but you're really not. Something's off. Mm-hmm. Or something happens to your equipment, and you just start shooting like crap.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'd actually texted you a couple weeks ago, and I was trying to find out I don't know if you remember me asking you what a really good index release was.
Mm-hmm.
Something had happened where I just felt like my thumb barrel was off and my entire process was just screwed.
Mm-hmm.
And this happens, I feel like it happens to a lot of people out there where they've been shooting great at home. They've been shooting, everything's great. And then just one thing happens and it entirely throws them off.
Mm-hmm.
How do you get them back on that front porch to blow that door open?
Well, the problem usually starts at home, and they have some shots they control and some shots they don't.
Mm-hmm.
And we become very results based. Like you said, people are shooting well, but they're only shooting well in result.
Right.
They're not shooting well in control. Right. So they're getting some decent results at home, but they're still punching the trigger a little bit, which means their system is very easy to blow apart.
Mm-hmm.
Their thought process, their house is built of toothpicks. right?
And the big bad wolf's going to blow it down.
Right. Most of them are actually homeless, right?
Yeah.
They don't even have a shot control house.
Yeah.
Right. So you take that fairly weak process and then you throw in some snafu and it completely blows them apart. Right. Whereas if at home you practice making decisions and you practice your concentration, you use shooting to practice making decisions. You use your shot to practice concentration.
Yeah.
So you build this house that's very strong and you know the layout and you know how to get through it and you know how fiery that concentration room is, but you've been through it so many times, you know exactly how to do it.
Now, within this well-built house, would you say that also includes a very well-tuned bow as well, right?
So that's all part of it, right? So that's the equipment stuff, but it's the process to the point where if my bow blows up, I can grab your bow and I shoot the exact same shot, no matter what. I can grab your release. And as soon as I understand the trigger tension in your release, I'm going to shoot it with control. Why wouldn't I? Right?
Yep.
So you get this process that's so strong and it's so blueprinted that you can literally have 100 different releases in front of you. You pick one up. You understand how the trigger works, right? You might work it around a little bit and then you're going to shoot it with control no matter what. That's a given.
Yeah.
Right. Whatever bow it is, right? I see people at trad bow shoots where all the bowyers are there and they'll grab a bow, the bow of their dreams, maybe from the bowyer that they really like. And they're like, oh my God. And they're walking to the bow testing area and they get up to the bow testing area and they pull the damn thing 21 inches and let it go 4 or 5 inches in front of their face. And they go, man, this bow is so fast. I'm like, imagine if you pulled it all the way to your face, what would happen?
Yeah.
So it starts at home and shooting this very controlled shot every time, no matter what. And then if these things come in that try to blow your process apart, it's easy, right? And then you know what this bow actually feels like when you shoot a shot with no pre-ignition movements. So if the bow feels different, something has changed in that bow. And get yourself the bow tuning knowledge to go, okay, what's different? My timing's a little bit off, right? Maybe my serving slipped a little bit. And you'll be able to identify these problems much easier and fix them. But if you have a catastrophic error, that cannot blow up your program.
Yeah.
Right? When you are on this hunt of a lifetime and you cut your bowstring, right? You grab the guide's bow that he's had stored in his closet for the last 10 years. Doesn't matter. Pull that thing out, get it tuned up, and shoot it with control no matter what. And you will find the same success. Right? So that's what it's not about getting people back on track. That starts way before their bow blew up.
Yeah.
Right. So it's, that's where I want people to be. I want people to feel the power of shot control, knowing exactly how you're going to do what you're going to do. You can't wonder about those things. You cannot wonder, am I going to be able to control this shot or maybe not? Right. If it's a maybe not, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Because remember, your mind has a default, and that is to punch the trigger. And that's to punch the trigger as soon as the pin gets on the target. That's efficient, right? So this is just it's a life-changing event to gain control of your shot.
It's pretty big. And I think you definitely know when it happens too.
Oh yeah.
Definitely.
And when it does, it doesn't just happen. You make it happen and you got to blueprint how you did it. That's even more important. And that's why I asked you on the rest of TAC, did you have any more shots that were not in control? And if you did, that simply means that your blueprint is not strong enough yet, Will. Right? And that blueprint of what was I thinking?
And I will definitely agree. I will definitely agree. It is.
I want to know that first question of the blueprint. What was I thinking? I want to know what you were thinking after here I go. And the answer to that has to be 100%, 110% shot activation movement. That's all I'm thinking about after here I go. You're in the concentration room, for God's sakes. The aiming room is back across the hall.
Yeah.
You're not going back in there. There's no reason to go back in there, right? Well, there is a reason to go back. If you have massive wind and it blows you completely off the critter, you're going to have to go back in the aiming room and fix that, right?
But then that's also a good time do you think that's also a great time when people find themselves having to go back to the aiming room? Should they let down and get back to the front porch, or?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Absolutely not. You can't this is the critter of a lifetime, right? You're not going to let down and waste all that movement and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So you're not going to let down. You just simply need to go back unlock the door to the aiming room, right? Go back in there, tell everybody to shut up, relax, right?
Yeah.
And then you got to close the door again. So you go back in the aiming room. When you close the door and lock the door, it takes another here I go.
That's
right?
True. Yep.
So, what were we going on before I got off that little squirrel hole?
See, our process wasn't good there.
Yeah. Oh, your blueprint, right? So
my blueprint.
So the first question of blueprint, what was I thinking? And I want to know what you're thinking after here I go. Question number 2, what was I saying? What words were you using to walk through the concentration room? Right?
I was telling myself, let's go.
Okay, let's go is your decision. But there's got to be something that follows that guides your movement. Like keep pulling, keep pulling, keep pulling. It might be humming, right? And it has to increase. Whatever it is for you that directs and traps your concentration. Concentration lies in speech. Okay? Yep. So question number 1, what was I thinking? Specifically, after here I go. Question number 2, what was I saying? Specifically, what words was I using and at what rate was I saying them to guide my movement through the concentration room? Question number 3, could I have stopped it? Was I so keenly concentrated on the shot activation movement that I could have stopped it anywhere within it? And if you can say yes to that, that's huge, right? So if you can say, yes, I could have stopped my trigger movement anywhere within it, that means that you are truly in a closed loop control system. The only way you can get yourself in a closed loop control system for an explosion is your determination level has to be high enough so that you make decisions, so that you're present, so that you can concentrate. The 4 fundamentals of precision shooting: determination, decisions, presence, and concentration. So if you can say, yes, I could have stopped it, that's a big deal, right? And then question number 4, what decisions did I make to get myself in the process for this one shot? Because all the determination, all the decisions, all the presence, all the concentration only lasts for one shot. You're not even in the house anymore after that shot breaks, right? That's why you got to go back around to the front and make the same decision. I'm going to shoot this shot with control no matter what to get through the door. And then talking yourself through that half draw moment. I'm going to do this right. Whatever it is you say to increase your presence so that you can address that trigger. Then it's here I go. That makes you intensely present to get through that concentration room on that trigger. So the blueprint, and you break that perfect shot and you're like, okay, you got to blueprint it. Ask yourself those questions.
What did I do?
Exactly the same questions if you punch the trigger.
Yep.
So you have that one you punch, you're like, damn it. There it was. What was I thinking about? Well, if you don't know, like if you can't answer that instantly, you weren't thinking about anything, or you were thinking about, talking to the person next to you, or, oh my God, that's a long ways, or John Dudley standing here next to me, whatever it may be. I don't care.
Yeah.
Your mind was not in the process. What was I saying? And again, you're going to find that you probably weren't saying a damn thing.
You were just wanting to get the shot off as quick as you could.
Right. Could I have stopped it? Well, if you punched the trigger, you were in open loop. So obviously you couldn't have stopped it because you're moving so fast you can't get any feedback to stop it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that's a no. Final question, what decisions did I make? And that's the major fail point.
Yeah.
That's when people find themselves at full draw instead of drawing the bow with knowledge and purpose.
Now,
so it's just you're using the blueprint to either find the success or to find the fail point. Same questions.
Got it. Now, I want to touch on this closed loop process. Closed loop for the listeners. Explain the difference between the open loop and closed loop for some of those that may not understand from the listener's perspective.
So open loop, there's two movement systems that govern, or there's two control systems in your mind that govern all of your movements. The one that your mind prefers is open loop. Open loop, in an open loop control system, the brain sends a motor program to the effector. The effector is the muscle group that receives the motor program, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're shooting a shot, the effector is essentially, say, index finger trigger. The effector is your index finger, right?
Got it.
So open loop is a movement that is so fast that you cannot gain feedback within it. Like, think about when you punch the trigger. When you send that motor program, there ain't no stopping it in the middle.
Right.
Or if you swing a baseball bat, you shouldn't be stopping it in the middle. That's why you get check swings and all that stuff, because people have difficulty stopping that movement.
Yeah.
Right? So open loop is what your mind prefers, because in shooting, if you go open loop on the trigger, it can link other motor programs to your trigger motor program. So it links you closing your bow hand, you closing your eyes, you coming to center. Maybe it's a collapse of muscles. It can put all kinds of different pre-ignition movements in with. It sends them down the same neural pathway, right? So you get this flood of motor programs going down. They all happen simultaneously. And you'll see that in the flinch. Like if you hand a big old nuclear magnum rifle to somebody and you've got the safety on, or it's not loaded, you're like, this thing's going to kick the crap out of you. Get ready. And if they've never shot before, they're going to, they're going to get on this rifle, and then you're going to see all of the pre-ignition movements that are linked to the trigger motor program. They flinch. Their whole body will jerk, and they'll put 100 pounds on that trigger when all it needed was 3, right? So all those things, that flinch, that's all those motor programs getting sent at the same time. That can only happen if you go open loop. Okay.
Okay.
Now, closed loop takes a decision, right? Takes a decision, especially for a movement that's going to cause an explosion. Mm-hmm. Okay. So closed loop is you decide to send a slower motor program to the effector. And now it's slow enough that it gets sent back through what's called the comparator. The comparator is the feedback station. Now, this is really a Reader's Digest version of this stuff, but it's the basics of what I teach, because you don't need to know all the rest of it, right? You just need to know that when it gets sent back through the comparator, that's the too fast will, right? It's that signal gets sent to the brain. And then the brain is able to modify the motor program because you're now moving slow enough that you could stop it, or modify the motor program. So that's the deal with open and closed loop control systems. Your mind wants to do open, but it takes a conscious override to go closed.
Yeah.
So that's what we teach in ShotIQ and the online course. I don't want to give away all the secrets, but
nope. They can sign up for that.
Yeah. So that's the difference. How do you get yourself to go closed loop on the trigger, especially in a high stress shooting?
Got it.
That's the science there.
So then at the end of the day too, I'm kind of coming at this from more of an equipment standpoint. Mm-hmm. Would you say it is important to invest in a good release?
Absolutely.
Especially for compounds. Now, obviously, the more traditional guys, that's more, you're talking more of your fingers at that point and clickers.
Yeah, so with the trad stuff, you can buy the most expensive bow you want. But if you don't pull it all the way to full draw, it doesn't mean a damn thing. So in traditional archery, it takes way more determination to control yourself because your release is connected directly to your brain.
Yeah.
But in the compound world, what you're paying for with releases is the ability to adjust the release. That's what you're paying for, right? And the crispness of the sear system. And so if you were to take a lower end release, you're going to find that release has got a ton of travel, right? And it doesn't break clean. It's made for trigger punching, right? It's made for open loop work because most of the people that are shooting those don't realize that they're punching the trigger. So they don't feel that travel because it's an open loop motor program. So they just send that sucker, right?
Let her rip, tater chip.
The finger goes through the entire trigger process and they don't realize it.
Yeah.
Now, if you take a more expensive release that has a better sear system in it, and you can set the trigger super hard as far as spring tension goes, make sure you're getting a release where you can actually adjust spring tension.
Yeah.
Or it's got to have a spring in there, right?
Yeah.
So that may give folks some clues about releases. So get that release. If we're talking index finger triggers or thumb buttons, where you can adjust the spring tension enough so where you can really climb into the release. Remember, because if you only climb into the release a little bit and it takes a breath to make it go off, the door to your aiming room is shut, but not all the way, right?
It's not locked.
It's not locked. I mean, you lock it with a decision, but if you have to get on your trigger real dainty, you haven't even really closed the door. It hasn't even latched, right?
So you prefer people to have a heavier trigger then?
Absolutely. So I want them to be able to climb into that sucker and slam the friggin' door on the aiming room. I'm done with that. It's very calming to be able to reach around that trigger and put some good pressure on it and know that it's not going to go off. It's very calming to your mind to do that.
Yeah.
And in the shot control house analogy, it lets you slam that door shut and gives you time to go, here I go. That's locking the aiming room door, right?
Okay.
And so you start into this trigger work. Here I go. Keep pulling, keep pulling, keep pulling. And what you're doing is you're moving your back and you're basically pulling your hand through the strap. You're not moving your finger anymore. You've wrapped deep around that trigger and you're now moving your back so that you're pulling your hand through the release. You got to be careful on these release aids that you don't move the head of the release. Whatever shot activation movement you do, it cannot move the head of the release. Therefore, you have to be pulling a relaxed hand over the release, right? Or if you're using a thumb button, you may be squeezing from the pinky, right? And pushing the release into your thumb, but you're not pulling on the entire system and moving it. Because if you move the head of the release, you're changing the pressure systems in the bow and you're not going to impact in the same place.
Right.
So, getting a good release that you can climb into and put some pressure on, because all you're doing with the initial trigger movement is you're setting your cruise control. So you got to be able to move and feel a movement and go, that's it, right? So you start into the movement and you're getting this increase of speed. You're pressing on the accelerator nice and smooth. You're watching the speedometer come up. And when you hit the speed that you want, you hit the cruise control button. And your job then is to just stay in that rate of increase, that speed, until it breaks, right? So if your initial speed breaks the release, that means it's like trying to set cruise control at 1 mile an hour. You're feathering the gas and right? You don't know how much to go. You want to be able to climb in and start pressing on the gas nice and smooth until you get to the right speed, and then you just stay in that speed.
Got it.
Right? So that's true for any release aid. Let's say that we're working a hinge with a click, right?
Okay. I was about to ask about those.
You draw back and aim first. Once your aim is complete, then you move to the click. The click is that is the sound of you slamming the door on the aiming room. Okay? So you aim first, then you move to the click, then it's here I go, and then roll, and you're rolling the release. You do not pull on a hinge. It's not a back tension release.
Yeah.
There's no professional archer I know of that shoots a hinge with back tension.
No.
They all use hand manipulation to roll the release in a closed loop fashion, right?
Yep.
If they're shooting a hinge. Now you'll see some people on a thumb button punching the crap out of it and doing okay. And people are like, well, how do they do that? Well, look at their bow. They have extreme weighted their bow to the point where their pin is moving so slow that they can actually catch it.
They're compensating.
And they've got their release set so light that their open loop movement is very, very light on the trigger, so it doesn't move their point of impact. Now, that is a way to shoot. It's hard to argue that. That is a way to shoot. But those folks go up and down, right?
Mm-hmm.
One tournament, they're a god, and the next one, they're not, right? Whereas I have Bodie shooting a hinge in that fashion, and so his every day is better than most people's good day. And he's going to shoot the same way every time. So.
And he's only, 15 now?
He's 14.
14.
And he just set the 2 adult state records in Washington yesterday and won the state target championships in the adult class. So,
no way.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
Machine. But he's a machine because he has control, right?
Yeah.
We have built control into him since he was very, very young. I did not let him go down the path of target panic.
That's awesome.
Right.
Now, what about those back tension? Last one. What about the back tension, guys?
You mean tension activated releases?
Yeah, tension activated. Yep.
So tension activated releases are very unique in the fact that they make decisions for you. Like if you are punching the trigger on a index finger trigger,
mm-hmm.
right? Oh man, I just can't quite get this thing. You go to a tension activated release, and all of your worries will go away, right? Except for that release, be it a silverback or a Stan Element or a, you name it, whichever one, Carter Evolution, whatever one you want to pick. If you shoot a tension activated release because it's the only one you can control, then you're not fixing the problem.
Yeah.
The problem is that you're not making decisions. And you're allowing the release to make decisions for you. So on a tension activated release, you get everything hooked up, you push the safety in, you draw back and aim, you let the safety off, and then you start pulling. Well, if you don't pull, the release is not going to fire.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it forces you into a shot activation movement, which is cool, but it's not the most accurate system out there. If it was the most accurate system, then every professional archer would shoot a tension activated release.
So then you wouldn't recommend those to most shooters, then?
I wouldn't recommend them only because it's not getting to the core of the problem.
Right.
And back tension is a huge input into your shot. That's why they're not the most accurate system, because you're essentially moving the head of this release. So like if I have a person that comes to me and they just won't make the decision, their determination level is, number one, not high enough to make a decision so that they're present, so that they can concentrate. So if they're punching the trigger on that index finger and they think they have it, but they're still punching the trigger, if they're in that belief system, then I'll give them a tension activated release and I'll have it set so it won't go off. So I'll teach them how to do it right. So they push the safety and they draw back and aim, and then they let the safety. I'm like, okay, start pulling. And you can see that their mind is very hesitant to put any tension on it.
They're anticipating.
They'll start pulling a little bit, and then you'll see kind of a big, a big movement. And it didn't go off. So you'll see that movement collapse. And then at some point, they give it this huge jerk, right? It's when the subconscious gives up and goes, just let me have it, right? And so it jerks the release. The release does not fire. I'm like, okay, push the safety in and let it down. Okay, let's go through the blueprint. What were you thinking about? Well, I was thinking about pulling. Then I thought, God, this thing's never going to go off. And it's at that moment that the subconscious takes it and yanks it, right? What were you saying? Well, I wasn't really saying anything other than, why isn't this damn thing going off?
Or, oh crap.
Right. Could you have stopped it? Nope, not during that jerk. You couldn't have stopped it because that was your shot activation movement. And then what decisions did you make? Well, I didn't make any, right? So we blueprint it. Like, okay, let's do it again. So they push the safety in, draw back, aim, let the safety off, and now they start pulling. Now you see they're actually moving, right? Mm-hmm. And they're pulling, and they're pulling, and they're pulling, and they're starting to shake. And they get to the point where I'm like, okay, push the safety in, let it down. So they let it down. What were you thinking about? And I was just thinking about pulling. Oh, welcome to the show.
Welcome.
Right?
Welcome.
Right. So now I finally got them to become singular minded into a movement, right? Mm-hmm. And after I get them to, and they usually only do the big jerk one time, maybe twice, but not 3 times. And so I get them to where they're just pulling and the release isn't going off. That's cool. And then and only then will I take the release and start to loosen it to where they can actually make it go off. And then we simply blueprint that again. What are you thinking? What are you saying? Could I have stopped it? What decision did you make? And they able to answer all those questions. And then I instantly put them on the release that they brought to the clinic. Whatever, even if it's the worst piece of crap index finger trigger they could have brought, I'm like, that's the best one you could have brought.
The $20 Cobra Walmart release.
Right. Because that makes you concentrate even more through all that travel.
Yeah.
You're getting burnt bad in that concentration room with all that travel. But think about how much stronger it's making you.
That's
in
true.
Your decision making, in your concentration. Those are the true skills of precision shooting.
I love it. I love it. Well, man, I think we just about hit our time for this one. I love all this. I mean, I think we've covered a lot of great subject matter to help people begin to make their own blueprint.
Yep.
But tell us real quick, where can we find ShotIQ? Where can we find you on Instagram?
Yeah, so it's Joel Turner _ShotIQ on Instagram. I've got several Facebook identities, I guess. I've got my personal Joel Turner page, and I've got ShotIQ. And ShotIQ.com is the website. That's where you'll find the online courses. And a lot of people, they listen, like when they start listening to this and it resonates with them, they start searching for Joel Turner podcasts, right? And so they listen to all these podcasts and they start shooting, and it's changing how they're doing it. So people are trying to put it all together through podcasts. And I will tell you this, it's not all in the podcast, ladies and gentlemen.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
So a lot of it is there. And if it helps you, then man, I'm super happy for you that it helped you out. But I'm trying to get people to a place where there's no more wonder. You do not wonder how you're going to do. You know exactly how you're going to shoot every shot for the rest of your life. So the online courses are on there. I've got my archery course and control process shooting. I've got my precision pistol course. It's just very powerful stuff. And if people want me to come and do a clinic at their shop or at their local club or whatever, just email me. It's joelturner@shotiq.com. Email me and we'll get things set up. And let's just hope that I can retire from being a cop and do ShotIQ full time, because I want to have the most impact that I can. And I'm having a lot of impact in the shooting world. And the whole cop thing is starting to get in the way of that. So, and it's just getting stupid to be, man, it's crazy. And I don't want to discourage people from becoming cops, but it's really getting crazy out there. So
yeah, it is.
If you are a cop, be careful, keep your head down. If you want to be a cop, then think about it. And it is a noble profession, but I have other things that I need to be doing in this world for sure. So,
well, do you have any more clinics coming up the rest of this year? You're pretty much done for 21 and you're going to start heavy in 22.
Yeah, I'll start. 22 is going to be rocking, man. So we've got, we're going to do ATA and that starts it. And then Bodie we'll be shooting a bunch of tournaments. And yeah, 22 is going to be super busy, and it's going to be awesome. So just contact me if you want to get clinics going. We got to get them going kind of a year in advance, and because it's a movement, man. Shot control has become a thing.
Big time. Well, I know we'll get to see you down at the Elk Shape camp that we're actually going to be hosting down here. We're going to have that down here, so it'll be fun to have you down here. It'll be 50 guys, I think, at those Elk Shape camps.
Yeah,
so it's going to be fun, man.
Yeah, right on. I'm looking forward to it, bud.
Likewise. Well, Joe, man, we really appreciate you hopping on for us this morning for a little while and teaching everybody about the blueprint, how to become a better archer, or at least start thinking about how to become a better archer so they can start creating their own processes.
Right. Yep. It's shock. Everybody can do it. Right. And target panic is not a disease. So you're not going to catch it by talking about it.
Nope.
It's already in there. Right. So just get the knowledge, right? Get the knowledge and figure out what we need to be doing in this and feel the power of shot control, man. It's so cool.
Sweet. I love it. Well, Joel, we'll see you on the next one. I know we'll have to have you on here again, man.
Oh, yeah, brother. I'm looking forward to it.
Likewise.
And there you have it, everybody. Another end to another good episode of the Geared for the Outdoors podcast. We had Joel Turner coming on board. We just want to thank him again, teaching all y'all how to become a better bow hunter, creating that blueprint, and just having an overall much better shot process so you can execute a great shot on whatever you're hunting. So we just want to thank everybody for tuning in, listening to another great episode of the Geared for the Outdoors podcast, and we'll see y'all on the next one.